Okay, hi everybody. This is Kim, and I'm doing a quick interview with Joe because some of you may have noticed his recent posts on Facebook and found them intriguing. And this is a point that opened up with Joe recently. The point of basically storytelling and how to become a storyteller, but a storyteller with a purpose. So I just wanted to ask you, Joe, well, first of all, what is the context and the purpose of your particular style of storytelling?
Um, I have a story about that. So, this was coming out of a period where I had been very depressed in my life. Things were just not working well. I was becoming emotionally short tempered, frustrated, angry, and I realized that one of the things that helped me get through that was the willingness to be honest with myself and say what I was going through. And this moment came when somebody had asked me to do a recording to basically talk about this event that was going on in my life. And leading up to it, I still felt like I don't want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to go there. I just want to be left alone. Let me just deal with it. And even thinking about it, I would get like all tense and like irritable. It's like, ah. But that moment just before I said the first words in that recording where I was going to talk about what I was going through, something shifted in me. And this came from that willingness to say things as they are, which to me means you become self-honest in a way that lets you look at yourself without attaching yourself to the judgments, the emotions, the hang-ups, the unresolved issues that boil inside when we keep it to ourselves, and we're not finding constructive ways to work with it. And that pointed me onto a clue, which is that when we're able to tap into that point of authenticity, when we're able to point ourselves back inward and look at ourselves directly and be able to understand our pain in a way that is helpful instead of hurtful, that is not only helpful, it's transformative.
Wow, cool.
Because the pain that we carry, the emotions, the stories in our heads that we tell ourselves over and over and over and over, they can become a burden. They can get to a point of you really being lost in your own stories, in your own past, in your own emotions, which is why it's critical to understand storytelling from the perspective of, it's not about how do you tell a good story. It's not about how do you get a bigger audience. It's not about anything other than you reaching a point of authenticity with yourself, because everybody has stories in their own heads. Everybody lives with stories as though they are real. And that's the key. We live our stories as though they are real, whether or not they are. So when you understand the stories, when you're able to look at what stories you've been participating in your life, you get to understand what life you're creating. But more importantly, you understand your role as the author and not just the character. You realize you're not victimized by the story you've been living in, whether that's chronic depression or anger or addiction. None of that has to define you. In fact, you've been defining yourself the whole time. It's just parts of us forget about that.
Yeah.
Conveniently.
Yeah.
So for me, storytelling isn't about telling good stories or trying to reach out to people. There is an element of that, but for me, I trace it back to the original intent of storytelling, which is, if you think about ancient cultures, during the rise of human civilization, knowledge and wisdom was passed through storytelling. The most important people of the tribe were the storytellers because they imparted wisdom. They're the ones that say, don't go over that hill, there's saber-toothed tigers over there. Don't. Or they say, don't eat those berries because they're poisonous. They impart wisdom, they impart knowledge for your survival so that you can learn, so that you can make meaning, make sense out of things, and out of that make better decisions.
So this sounds like incredibly empowering, self-empowering.
Yes.
And actually, like, even just hearing you talk right now, it's like there's like movement in me, like inspiration.
Yes.
And it makes me think of these quotes like, become the author of your own script. You know, every day is a new page in your book. But the thing is that I'm realizing is that I've heard these and they've also moved me, but I've never really had a practical application or explanation of how do you actually even go about doing that. Is this kind of like what you're doing in structuring?
Yes, that is what I'm currently busy with, because a lot of this, it's a marriage of things. It's the time I've spent working on myself with the Desteni tools. So, it's things like the self-writing, developing self-awareness, self-forgiveness, developing that point of authenticity. But it also gets married with my flair for storytelling, which I've always had, and understanding story structure. And putting all of this together has helped me to come up with a way to start to understand our own personal stories and how to start working with them in a way where we're kind of taking our power back. We're kind of changing the way we relate to our own stories. Because the important thing is, it's not about covering up or changing the events that happened, because that's not possible, right? The past has happened. Whatever traumatic experiences you went through, you went through. You're going to live with it forever. But what can change is your relationship to what happened. So instead of things being painful for you to look at, you can learn how to look behind that pain and see what the lesson was. And you'll realize, just like in every good story, the hero goes through that dip, that moment of crisis, where things are going bad and painful, and there's a price that the hero has to pay in order to go through the arc, the character arc, where they change. It's the same thing with life. A lot of us have had to face painful things. A lot of us have had to go through cycles of the same thing.
Yeah,
over
definitely.
and over and over. So what is that indicating? It's indicating a character that is not completing their character arc. But every time you hit the same point, whether it's addiction, relationships, anger, whatever the issues are, you kind of keep doing this over and over.
Like life's trying to
over.
show you there's a lesson here.
Exactly.
And you're providing the structure of how to kind of weed it out, see the lesson, learn it.
Exactly. So the point of what I'm doing with storytelling and working with people now is the first story you have to get straight if you want to be a storyteller, whether you want to be doing blogs or vlogs, or whether you want to make films, or if you want any kind of public presence at all, doesn't matter. The first thing you have to get clear is your own story. Because like it or not, you're always a storyteller. You're always going to be telling yourself stories based on your relationship with your own past. So if you're one of these people like myself who has had these things in life where you keep running into the same problems, same situations over and over and over, that's indicating that you need to start changing that story. You need to realize that you're not this victimized character. You need to realize you're the author. You need to realize, why are you setting yourself up for these things? Why are you coming back to the same setup?
Yeah.
What is the lesson? What's holding you back from just making that jump, making that point of transition to the next chapter where you change? And that comes with pain. That comes with understanding how to look at the pain constructively, which I do through story structure, which I do through using story structure to understand how you're setting yourself up in the story of your own life so that you can be a better author, a better storyteller to yourself, tell a better story and live a better story.
So you have quite an extensive background in film, drama.
I mean, extensive, but
well, whether
sure.
it's self-taught or
Yes.
through school
Yeah.
or just life experience. So I can understand how this point would have opened up for you, especially with having also applied the Desteni tools. But do you think that anybody can learn the process you're developing now?
Yes. In fact, I really like working with people who have no background in storytelling because they're a lot easier to teach. But put it simply, everybody is a storyteller. Everybody knows beginning, middle, and end. The same thing happens to every single person when I say the words once upon a time. Immediately you're shifting your focus into, okay, there's a story here. Like immediately you know what to do. You sink in and you reorient yourself for story mode. This happens naturally. Like I said, this is how we passed on wisdom and knowledge from way back before written word. So storytelling is embedded in us. We naturally look for stories. This is why we say, what's the point? Get to the point. What are you trying to tell me? Cut to the chase. Where does that come from? It comes from a naturally instilled sense of what the story is. We want to find out what the meaning is. What's the lesson here for me? We focus on that naturally. So anybody can learn this because we're already doing it. We're kind of hardwired for it. It's just now learning how to utilize it with awareness.
It's almost like the storyteller is teaching a lesson, but you're putting it in such a way where the storyteller is both teaching a lesson but also teaching themselves a lesson from their own story. So it goes both ways.
And that's something that I thought was incredibly powerful as well, because storytelling isn't always a one-way transaction. Oftentimes, the storyteller is transformed as they tell the story. Especially if the storyteller's talking about something personal, something that they personally went through.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, like I said, we carry very negative narratives about ourselves, things that we're ashamed of, things that we haven't worked through. And the ability to get clear on that story for ourselves and then to be able to voice it is powerful, is healing, is transformative. It's incredibly beneficial for the storyteller because it helps them move past their own blocks. It helps them not only make sense of their own past and their own story and frame it in a way that helps them, but it also brings them out of the isolation that these stories can create. It brings the storyteller out of that and into a position of sharing, of giving, of turning this thing that was once painful into something that's nurturing. And that act in itself is phenomenal, I think.
Sounds incredible, actually. Do you have any final words on this, or if anybody's interested in learning this from you, can you share what they can do?
At the moment, I'm workshopping with a small group of people just to kind of, for me to practice the technique for myself and to create the starting material for people to come. But anybody that's interested, anybody that has questions, whether it's you want to become a better storyteller for your own purposes, or if you're interested in the more healing aspects of what storytelling can mean to you and for others, you can contact me through Facebook. That's the best way to find me right now. And step up and let your questions be known to me, and I will do my best to respond. But this is what I'm going to basically be doing likely for the rest of my life. So
awesome.
Yeah.
You'll just get better and better at it. Okay, so I'll include the link to Joe's Facebook profile in the description box. Send him a question if you're interested in what he has to teach and share. Thanks for sharing this point now and opening it up. And you can follow Joe on Facebook. His posts are awesome. All right, thank you, Joe. And thanks everybody for watching.